I'm Ian Conyers, the state senator for the 4th District. I currently have the pleasure of representing about a third of the city of Detroit. I represent your neighbors just adjacent to you in Southgate. I represent Lincoln Park. I represent Allen Park. I think it's incredibly important for you to know your candidates and appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up as one of 8 children with 2 young parents over on the west side, and lived in Lansing, lived in Flint. My mom's from Flint, my dad's from here in Detroit. And I think when you look at that, some people call it the best of both worlds, but we all know those are areas that go through tough times. I think in your household is where you learn those very first lessons, and it's where each of us draw those instincts from on what type of politician you'll be. I started right here in the 13th as our treasurer after becoming a volunteer, and it was there I had the courage to run against an incumbent Democrat for state rep just 2 years ago. Now, through no vision of my own, I had the opportunity to seek a higher office, and I think that's where we find ourselves again today. As a state senator, I promised to build jobs, protect neighborhoods, and develop community, and that's the legislation that I've authored as a state senator. I worked on giving more money to our teachers. My grandmother was a teacher at Corville on the east side for 27 years. If you don't invest in teachers, you can't honestly have an expectation that economic incentives or anything else will lure people to our district. We have to invest in the people. I think we also have a legacy of racism and cultural insensitivity that has to go away. We can't expect people to want to live, work, and play here if we've got legacy institutions holding our children back. I introduced legislation this year that would remove any public school funding from any Michigan schools who still have racist names. You'd think in our state we got past that legacy, but we haven't. I don't think that the Red Men is a cultural name like the Redskins or like the Cleveland Indians. It's a racial slur. So we've got a lot of work to do in this district, and I think you're seeing that play out at the national level. You know, in our community, we may not every day face those issues you're seeing on the border, but we're specifically in the African American community understanding of the separation narrative. We've been separated from our young men, separated from our young women, and we deserve a congressperson here in the home of civil rights that understands that at the grassroots levels. As I mentioned, I'm one of 8 brothers and sisters. I'm very proud to be the first to finish high school, the first to go to college, get a master's degree in urban planning, and bring home those resources to our district. If elected your next congressperson, I'll be accessible. I'll do more than talk tough. I'll bring back the resources. That means in transportation, that means in public advocacy, and that means specifically in infrastructure spending. Thanks so much.
Good evening, and thank you so much for hosting this forum. I am Brenda Jones, and I am currently serving as the City Council President for the City of Detroit. I am the longest serving council member in the City of Detroit, serving my 13th year and my 2nd term as City Council President. My experience is I've been the President, Vice President, and Steward of the Communication Workers of America, which is the union for telephone employees. I retired from the phone company after 31 years of working for the phone company. I worked in a law firm. I've also worked in an insurance agent. I've also owned my own small business downtown, which was a women's shoe store, for over 12 years. I've been a Black Club Association president, and I am currently now always out with the citizens and being called the citizens' voice. I truly believe that I am the most experienced person to represent the 13th Congressional District with the experience that I've had working with people, and I've been working with people basically all of my career. I graduated from Wayne State University with a degree in psychology. One of the things that I know is that you do not always agree with the people that you work with, but you have to know how to agree to disagree, reach across the aisle to be able to get something done for whom you are representing. That's what I've done in the city of Detroit. I often don't agree with myself and ask myself, why did I do that? But I still push on to do other things, and that's exactly what's going to happen in DC. I'm not going to always agree, and probably most of the time not agree with some of the people in DC. But I am here to represent the 13th Congressional District, to take the leadership experience that I've had and all of the controversial issues that I've dealt with as a city council member in my 13 years my experience onto the 13th Congressional District. I do believe that the quality of life cannot depend on your zip code, and that is exactly what is happening. Our quality of life is depending on our zip code, and I am ready to go to DC to fight to bring more resources back to the 13th Congressional District. Again, thank you for allowing me to be here.
First question will go to John Conyers III. In 2 minutes, please answer. In the wake of the Me Too movement and the news of congressional payoffs, if elected, what would you do to improve the culture of sexual harassment within your administration and abroad?
Well, in the wake of the Me Too movement, first of all, I think it's important that we take all accusations that women face seriously. That is of the utmost importance. Can you repeat the question one more time? I'm sorry.
If elected, what would you do to improve the culture of sexual harassment within your own administration and abroad?
Well, in my office, I wouldn't allow dating amongst coworkers, and we've already seen Congress take steps to make sure that actual congressmen cannot date staff. Beyond that, I would have a woman chief of staff first and foremost. We know that research shows that when women are in charge, whether they're on boards of major companies or Fortune 500 companies, or when they're CEOs of those companies, that the company makes better business decisions and they have less sexual harassment because of the culture within that company. So that's how I would address that first and foremost.
I think that the Me Too movement is a very courageous movement. And I certainly appreciate the women who have come forward. And, you know, one of the reasons people say, you know, well, why on earth did they wait so long to come forward? And I believe that one of the reasons that they waited so long is because we were not listening. And so now there's a culture where people are listening and they feel a lot more comfortable in coming forward. As a member of Congress, what I would do is make sure that we would have trainings all the time that talk about what is considered inappropriate behavior, you know, setting up systems of accountability, even making sure that myself as a member of Congress, a woman, there are always witnesses. There are always people there who will have my back, but also will be able to testify if there are inappropriate situations that are going on. I really believe that the ethics ethics committee must play a key role in making sure that all employees are safe. Staff members, regardless of their level within Congress, regardless of their job title, are safe. And so the members of Congress, the leadership has the role to do that, but also the member of Congress. So as a member of Congress, it's my role to create a comfortable environment where my staff members believe and know that they can thrive. You know, it is ridiculous that women should feel that they should have to sleep their way to the top or do certain things to be promoted. It is ridiculous that women would even be put in a situation where they felt that their promotion is based on how short their skirt is. And so I have seen this working on Capitol Hill. And so there is a dire need for women who understand the importance of promotion based on skill set and not necessarily based on image. Although image is very important, so there's mentorship that has to go on. And so I just believe that, you know, as a member of Congress, I have to lead by example, and I expect other members of Congress to do the same thing. Now, when this law is broken, I believe that people should be penalized. I believe that there should be a proper process for due process, but I believe that people should be penalized, and I do not believe that they deserve a pat on the back. And so I will be a strong member who stands, who will be courageous in standing against those type of predatory practices.
Thank you, I want you all to know there should be absolutely zero tolerance in creating any hostile work environment, not only on sexual harassment, but how, you know, the color of your skin, your sexuality, any of those. It's very, very important though, that as a member of Congress, that I am pushing forward an accountability process. As an attorney, I can tell you so many of the cases that come to Sugar Law Center, and we have sexual harassment cases, we have women that are pregnant getting discriminated against. You name it, it has come through the doors. But one of the biggest problems we've seen over and over again is the place of employment doesn't have a process to report it. And even when I was in the Michigan State Legislature, I was shocked that interns didn't have the same, in current law, interns didn't have the same rights as somebody that was employed in regarding to being sexually harassed or working in a hostile work environment. So know that as legal background, knowing that from working on a number of cases where women were victims of sexual harassment, even I had a male that was a victim of sexual harassment, that it's very important that we, now that we're listening, right, because of the Me Too movement, that we actually have a real process within government on different levels of all departments, but also really, really pushing back on this culture, well, that's just the way it is. It's very, it makes me very angry. I do not want to wait yet another big, large incident to get in the front page of the newspapers for us to actually pass some sort of real process where a person can go forward and report the sexual harassment and sexual assault in many cases. Thank you.
This is a interesting question for me. I was having a dialogue with some friends when we started to see the Me Too movement begin to happen, some other African American women. And what we found sort of in our discussion, and of course this is anecdotal, but I've read a little bit about this, is that a lot of times in our cases, many folks didn't know that they were being harassed. And what I mean by that is so much of what we experience as women of color we have trials, is what I'm attempting to articulate. And so in having many of those trials, a lot of times we just thought that was par for the course, whether it was being treated, and I'm not talking about anything super blatant, but whether it was being spoken down to, or rubbed, or whatever. So I think what people are not saying on some level, and this may be basic to a lot of you, is that a lot of women need themselves, and men, to have an understanding of what behaviors are appropriate and what behaviors that are happening to them are potentially inappropriate. I think that, believe it or not, there is more of a disconnect in that than people would assume. Because sexual harassment or harassment in general is not always something that's extremely blatant. But a woman could be bearing, or a man, I would assume, feelings of just being uncomfortable or not being received well or appreciated appropriately in their professional experience, but not know exactly how to express that. So I think first, one, helping women gain an understanding of what they do not have to be subject to. And then secondly, letting them know or encouraging them to understand that it's okay for them to speak their truth. A lot of women of color in particular, let me sit back, the person didn't touch me, let me just sit back and I need my job. Nobody's going to believe me. I need this experience, and I'm thinking about my kids and my cousins, and all the other people that are looking to me, or the folks that I know who lost their jobs because they spoke up. So my point to you is I think when we have a community, and when I say a community, but I mean a group of women that are around other women that let them know that whatever it is that you have to say, any questions that you have to ask about experiences that you've had, nothing is a dumb question, nothing is inappropriate, whatever you have to say will be received in love, and let's figure it out. So that I think is something that sounds really basic, but that's where I would begin in my work on this issue, is creating a space where people, women and staffers and people in general know that what it is that they have to say is valued genuinely. Thank you.
I think the first thing that we have to do, one is I think we need to strengthen the whistleblower protections for these women, so when they come out, they're not having someone that acts against them, one. I think secondly, we need to make a much more easier process for women to be able to file these complaints via the internet or whatever have you in Congress. And this is not just in terms of women who are in Congress, but who are staffers in Congress, but also just across the country. I also think that we need to strengthen federally sexual assault laws, period. I think that we also need to look to see if we could get rid of, I know in this state we do, but basically statute of limitations for women who have been sexually assaulted. I think it's absolutely absurd that you have women who've been assaulted over 25 years and cannot have a say. Because we all know in this room how hard we've had to work to get to what we got. And you know, there's a quote by Frederick Douglass that said, you may not get everything you work for, but you certainly will work for everything that you get. And for you to be able to work and pour your blood, sweat, and tears in your career, and then have someone sexually assault you, and forgive my language here, and because your fear of being what they call slut shamed, where basically they talk about you and they talk about your sexual activities, and they blame you and they start attacking the victim, rather than making sure that women have a place to be heard when they've been sexually assaulted. There is no crime other than murder that I think is more disgusting and I think is more invasive. And I think the fact that in the Me Too movement, the reason why this movement has gotten so much momentum is because women for so long have been told to be silent, they have been intimidated, they have been shamed, they have been publicly ridiculed, they have been humiliated. And when I'm congressman, I'm going to put an end to that. That's why I'm running. That's what I think we need to do. I think we need to do a better job of hiring women. I think we need to do a job of electing women, but of course I don't want you to vote for me in this race. But other than get it out there. But in general, that's what I think we need to do. And I think more importantly, we need to do a better job of honoring women. Thank you very much.
I think it's an incredibly important question, and I think as a society we need to stop pretending that just because we pass a law, the issue is over. When you look at the civil rights legislation, when they passed that, racism wasn't over. And in the 90s, when the first assault laws and harassment laws began to come about, that didn't stop anything. And just because we don't have the opportunity to pass those laws right now because we have an administration in our state that aren't interested in it, doesn't mean that we don't write the legislation. And so I put up 2 pieces of legislation as a state senator. And if you can think that the powerful, fantastic superhero women that we look up to, those famous, those in these industries, those in politics have had a difficult time, what about women that don't feel so empowered to step up? What about those with an intellectual disability? What about those where the person who has done the crime is a member of law enforcement? And so I introduced a piece of legislation that would create a uniform report code where you'd be able to go not to the precinct where the person that may have attacked you has done it, but to any of the 83 DHS health services places across our state to report there. We also want to make sure that at any nursing home, at any group home, at any place where people with an intellectual disability live, that those people who already may have a hard time communicating can communicate to us that something has gone wrong. And so as a congressperson, I wouldn't pretend that our culture has gotten any better just because we pass a law, but each and every day I'd work to make sure the culture in my office respected women and honored women, but also didn't treat them as if they were a second-tier citizen. Like, we need to protect them. Women are strong and can stand up on their own, but it's the job of male culture to make sure that we're not continuing in a patriarchy that doesn't respect folks equally. So it's not just one size fits all. It's a matter where we need to take this very seriously, make policy, but then behave appropriately. We know when something's wrong. We know when things aren't right, and it's not going to be any committee assignment, any investigation, or anything like that that's going to make us behave. We need to call it out when we see it, make policy for it, but then act accordingly when we know it's happening. So that's what I would do as a congressperson.
Thank you. And let me first say, I do not tolerate any type of harassment, sexual harassment, racial harassment, no type of harassment. I think there should be a zero tolerance for any type of harassment. I can tell you that as the council president, one of the things that I did was bring in the Board of Ethics to do a training for all council members staff, and everyone that works on that floor. I also brought in the FBI to do a further training